The only way man can continue to prosper is to continue to be curious. And we have plenty of curiosity. This is the Be a Great Thinker podcast, examining the world and cutting through the BS, breaking down issues, looking at them through philosophical and intellectual eyes. And now your host, author of the book with the same title, the Be a Great Thinker podcast. This is Adrian Roth.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Be a Great Thinker podcast. I am your host, Adrian Roth. In this episode, we will examine conspiracy theories. Where did they start? How they proliferated? Why they persist, and how we can fight against them. It seems as though wherever you turn, there is some new, outlandish conspiracy theory. It used to be something that was only at the fringe of society and that only a few would even contemplate. Conspiracy theories were generally not in the mainstream. All of this changed, though, with the onslaught of social media. That is where strange, fringe ideas really took off. To be very upfront with you, I absolutely consider social media the bane of our society. In doing this particular podcast, I wanted to get to the root of where conspiracy theories got their start. I know they aren't a recent phenomena, but I really needed to explore their origin. So, I searched the Google machine and I made some interesting discoveries. Conspiracy theories have indeed been around for thousands of years. One of the earliest and widely known conspiracy theories happened during the ancient Roman era, in the time of Emperor Nero. The trope that Nero fiddled while Rome burned was actually a conspiracy theory. This conspiracy theory about Nero was spread by his enemies. Nero was actually nowhere near Rome while it burned. And this great fire happened in 64 AD. The fire, itself, was made worse by a combination of hot winds and wooden buildings. This is why it had completely devastated the great city. Now, because Nero was absent during the Great Fire, many people of Rome were pissed off at him and blamed him for the tragedy. After all, he was the emperor, so they felt he should have been more proactive or something and prevented the fire. There were several people that actually blamed Nero for deliberately setting the fire. They stated that Nero had started the fire so he could rebuild Rome in his vision. But Nero did not let the conspiracy theorists have the last laugh. He spread his own conspiracy theories on how the fire started. He blamed it on the Christians. Now, because Nero's words had power, his blaming Christians for the fire had a terrible ripple effect. This caused many Christians to be crucified or buried alive in revenge. This really showed just how destructive a conspiracy theory could be when it is taken too far. Another well-known conspiracy theory was the story of Marie Antoinette and the famous quote, "Let them eat cake." This infamous quote was supposedly her response when she was told that the poor people of France were starving because they did not have any bread to eat. At that time, bread was a staple in French households. So, the lack of this important staple was a terrible event. Marie Antoinette's answer of "let them eat cake" showed how out of touch that she and the King of France were with the plight of their subjects. But in drilling down into the facts, there is no evidence whatsoever that Marie Antoinette ever spoke these words. There is simply no evidence that she even had any callous sentiments, like this, toward her subjects. "Let them eat cake" were words written by the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote them in his book, Confessions, which was written in 1767. Those famous words were actually written about a different sovereign, not Marie Antoinette. But it was falsely attributed to the French queen. There was also the thought that this false quote started the French Revolution, but that also is not accurate. These supposed callous words were not the reason people in France revolted against the king. Instead, it was a multitude of factors. Mainly, it was due to the people of France being tired of the corrupt and out-of-touch monarchy and other upper-class leaders. They also wanted more control over their lives, and getting rid of the monarchs and those in the powerful ruling class was how they intended to start that process. But this piece of salacious gossip took on a life of its own and became embedded in history as though it were fact, when it was nothing but an inaccurate conspiracy theory. Yet I bet almost everyone listening to this podcast believed it was factual. That tells you how powerful a conspiracy theory can be in relation to accurate historical evidence. Speaking of historical evidence, the media also played a hand in spreading conspiracy theories and in changing history. Among the best known of these kind of media giants were William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. Both of these competing newspaper moguls began using yellow journalism in their many newspapers. They both had the platform where they could easily spread rumors and sensationalize the news. As so many people in the United States purchased their newspapers and thereby trusted what was in the pages as being fact, they were easily duped into believing the sensational stories and conspiracy theories they read. There was no reason not to believe that the news was anything but trustworthy. Newspapers were supposed to tell facts and not stories. So why wouldn't the average American just believe what was written down as being factual? Hearst knew how to tell a good story, and it didn't really matter whether it was true or false, just that it sold newspapers. He often searched for the most outrageous stories, ones that would hit on his readers' consciousness. The more salacious it was, the more it would convert into newspaper sales. And when he heard that the battleship, the Maine, was sunk in Havana, Cuba's harbor, he used his newspapers to spread the conspiracy theory that the Spanish were responsible for sinking the battleship. The thing was, there was absolutely no evidence behind Hearst's conspiracy theory, but again, the facts did not matter, it was a good story. Actually, the story took on a life of its own and gained such ground in the public discourse that it directed public opinion. This caused the people in the U.S. to demand that action be taken against the Cubans. At the same time, though, there were other atrocities in Cuba and other areas that were being touted along with the sinking of the Maine. This including women and children starving and rebels that were fighting and dying bravely against the supposed terrible government. All of these factors, along with Hearst's persistent coverage, helped start the Spanish-American War. It was the first war that was primarily driven by media coverage. Another very famous conspiracy theory was the idea that Pearl Harbor was not a surprise attack. This one prevails to this day. The U.S. was not involved in World War II when the fighting first began. The majority of the country wanted to stay neutral. It was said that Roosevelt wanted to be involved more deeply in the war, but because the country was soundly against it, he needed a reason to get involved. There are some that have thrown out the conspiracy theory that Roosevelt actually provoked the Japanese government to attack us. That he knew that the attack was going to happen, and he and his advisors did nothing to stop it. And that the attack then gave him the motivation he needed to enter the war. But, like with all the conspiracy theories before this one, there are so many holes in it that it would take a full episode just to debunk each hole. Also, like with all conspiracy theories, it does sound plausible. But then all conspiracy theories, no matter how outlandish they are, have a bit of plausibility. This is why they can be successful. Yet once you really inspect them closely, they crumble on that inspection. Conspiracy theories are in our vernacular. We still argue whether Kennedy was actually shot by Lee Harvey Oswald alone, or he was shot by the mob, or Russians, or as some have argued, the CIA. We wonder if Elvis faked his death, or if ancient aliens came down to Earth. Conspiracy theories like those have created cottage industries supporting them. They all have a large fan base of devoted followers. I actually grew up with family members who believed in conspiracy theories. Both of my grandmothers did not believe that we ever went to the moon. They both believed it was a hoax. That the whole thing was a lie, made in a television studio. And, for a time, yellow journalism changed. Instead of it being in the mainstream as in the days of Hearst and Pulitzer, it was instead subjected to being thrown into silly, fake newspapers such as the National Enquirer or the Weekly World News. But even those outlandish and ridiculous news rags had their fans. Among them was my grandmother, who read both of those magazines faithfully. In fact, she rarely read the regular news, or at least I never saw her read any newspapers. But she ate up everything those ridiculous entertainment news magazines printed. She believed in the Bat Boy. She also believed all of the outlandish conspiracy theories that dominated their pages. For her, this was fact, and this was the way the world worked. Now, I loved my grandmother, but I could never understand how she could believe the stuff she read, and accept the stupid stories and the conspiracy theories as being the truth. The thing was, my grandmother was a simple woman, prone to being easily duped, which seems to be a necessary condition for believing in conspiracy theories. But, then again, even the best of us have a tendency to fall into that trap. We are going to take a short break at this point. When we return, we will look at how a conspiracy theory can spin wildly out of control and how they are starting to dominate our society.
Critical thinking. What does it actually mean? It means questioning everything. But it also means questioning the questions. Critical thinking is essential for cutting through the junk you are exposed to on social media and everywhere else. It's for challenging conspiracy theories. It's for finding the truth in a sea of lies and misconceptions. Want to know how you can learn critical thinking? We'll show you how, in our book series, Be a Great Thinker. Be a Great Thinker is a series for people as young as 10 years old to as old as 90. The series introduces you to philosophy, philosophers, and the art of critical thinking. The book series will help you use your brain to be a great thinker. Book 1 is the introduction to critical thinking. And each book that follows introduces you to a different philosopher, like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and more, revealing their concepts and ideas in an easy and down-to-earth way. Find the series online at your favorite bookstore, or visit our website at beagreatthinker.com. So, be a great thinker and be part of the critical thinking revolution.
You're listening to the Be a Great Thinker podcast. We're bringing back the art of critical thinking.
Welcome back to the Be a Great Thinker podcast. Okay, so what really is a conspiracy theory? The scholarly definition of a conspiracy theory is the belief that two or more actors have come together in secret to achieve an outcome, and that this outcome can be something that is harmful or detrimental to all or part of society. It's the deep state, the Illuminati, or a cabal of individuals that drink the blood of babies and seem to own everything of value in the world. And discovering the ominous secret to the conspiracy is the key to exposing it and showing the rest of the world what the truth is behind it. Often conspiracy theories revolve around shadowy figures or organizations that are there to control our minds, our bodies, or the entire world. Then there are some that have a very interesting take on their beliefs, such as this flat earther who believes the Earth exists in a dome instead of it being a planet. Listen now to his explanation.
So we've got a dome over the top?
Yeah. So let me do this real quick. So the globe that you threw away, what we're talking about is we are all brought up, taught that we live on this tiny little rock that's covered in a little bit of water and smoke. We're flying through this impossible vacuum of space. We're saying that we live on a flat, enclosed world that is basically, you're basically living in a big soundstage with walls and a floor and a ceiling.
The Truman Show.
The Truman Show, yeah, very, very, very similar. That is so big that even our best and brightest didn't figure it out until about 1960. And when they did, decide to keep it a secret. The really, really short version is you don't live on a globe. This is what it looks like on the outside. That's what it looks like on the inside. There you go.
So why don't we just fall off the edge?
For the same reason, the space asteroid question. So for the same reason why you don't fall off the edge here. Antarctica is the only continent that doesn't look like anything else. All the other continents in here look perfectly fine. Antarctica, though, and it's not necessarily an ice wall, it's just Antarctica, this really, really, really high continent.
So you're saying Antarctica goes all the way around?
Yep.
So where's the North Pole?
North Pole's in the center.
Now, when I first heard that there were people that actually believed that the Earth was flat, I was completely floored. My first thought was, where did they get their education? My second thought was, how in this day and age with all the scientific evidence we have, does someone actually believe, or in this case not believe, that the Earth is round? How can someone who supposedly was educated by the same type of school as I was educated in, using similar educational methods, end up being so ignorant? Should we blame our education system or the prevalence of false facts? The flat earther you just heard has a lot of theories, which he claims was brought about by evidence that he supposedly has found in his research or have been privy to. He claims to be an expert. But, in all of his supposed high-minded explanations, such as his theory that the Earth exists under a dome and is not a planet, there is no real clear understanding of how that dome was created. This doesn't fall into his theory. He doesn't even try to make that clear. And, honestly, it almost doesn't seem to matter. His illogical theories don't have to be based on facts, and they are very flawed theories. He blames the military and other sources that keep the truth of the Earth being flat a secret from the rest of us. He conveniently dismisses the fact that the sources he states as being the primary actors in his theories did not exist hundreds or thousands of years ago. That to keep the lie hidden, many people had to be privy to it. That doesn't matter, because that doesn't jive with his conspiracy theory. So, in the end, it is quite a weak concept with even weaker, or basically, no evidence to back it up. Just insinuation, speculation, and living in a basic fantasy land. Much like in the days of Hearst and Pulitzer's yellow journalism, we are drawn to a spectacular narrative. I will say that I am one of those people that is not sure if Kennedy was actually shot by Oswald or not. I have listened to the other side, and though I believe myself to be a critical thinker, the side that claims that Oswald was simply a patsy and could not have acted alone does have some merit. Now, I could be totally off base on this, but if you can make a good argument, you can even win over the brightest people. That is why I said that even the best of us can be pulled into the glow of a conspiracy theory. If there is a hint of truth, it will start to make sense. Suddenly what seemed extraordinary and off base is now something that you can accept, mostly without question, or at least that it is to some degree plausible. It's a trap we sometimes have to be careful that we don't fall into. Have you found yourself believing in something that is on the brink of, or is a conspiracy theory? Don't fault yourself if you did, or still do, as they can be quite alluring. It sucks you in, especially when that conspiracy theory tickles your lizard brain. It might start as a small notion or idea that plays around in your mind. You might even be too frightened or embarrassed to seriously contemplate it, especially around anyone else. They will only think you are crazy for thinking that way. Then one day, you are exploring the internet or watching something on television or reading a book or a magazine article, and you find something that dives deep into that thought that was up to this point only floating around in your head. You see that there are others who have contemplated that same notion. They may even claim to have scientific evidence, though if you really view their evidence, it is nothing but pseudoscience. But that doesn't matter. It feels good to have a compatriot, someone who thinks as you do. You get caught up in wanting to understand more about this titillating theory, so you delve deeper into the heart of it. Before you know it, you fall into some dangerous and dark rabbit holes that become very hard to climb out of. You are under a spell. And you really don't want anyone to break that spell, no matter how dark it gets in this strange, new, but exciting world of the conspiracy theory. You can see how easily a fairly intelligent person can get wrapped up in something like this. What happens then when believing in a conspiracy theory brings you and others harm? This is where we look at how recent conspiracy theories have actually brought chaos and death, and continue to do so. The first of these destructive conspiracy theories is those created by the anti-vaxxers. The The conspiracy theories behind this all started with the flawed notion that vaccines caused autism. There was only one study that made that claim, and that study was resoundingly debunked by the scientific and medical communities. But that debunking did not have an impact on the conspiracy theory. There were those who believed the study as though it were the absolute truth. These people had a platform, and they spouted their beliefs to others, not caring about the true science, only the science that confirmed their bias against all vaccines. Enough people listened, took it to heart, and started repeating the lie. Soon parents were no longer vaccinating their children against the mumps, measles, and other diseases that had long since been eradicated, thanks to these very effective vaccines. But now, because so many children have not been vaccinated, they are making a comeback. And children are getting sick and even dying. Spreading the lie and the terrible conspiracy theories against vaccinations has caused much damage. It has had a ripple effect. This wrong-headed thinking became quite prevalent with COVID. Now, I will begrudgingly admit that Trump actually started out okay with COVID in only one way. He did the sensible thing by making sure that those in the medical field worked diligently to create a vaccine. He could have hit it out of the ballpark with the COVID vaccines. All he had to do was make sure that everyone in the country took the vaccine when it became available. But of course that would have been the right thing to do, which Trump never had the ability to do. So the fool that he is, he preferred to tout conspiracy theories and ridiculous cures instead of relying on science, as any true leader would. He made stupid references to using drugs like hydrochloroquine and that horse paste that celebrities like Joe Rogan took when he got COVID, or using bleach, instead of actual things that worked. And suddenly his fans and MAGA followers were absolutely and even violently against the COVID vaccine. They began spinning stupid conspiracy theories that the vaccines had microchips inside them, that Bill Gates and other left-wing radicals were going to use the COVID vaccine to spy on you. Or just as ridiculous, that the vaccine was somehow magnetized or affected by 5G. Don't believe me? Then listen to this next soundbite. This is an actual doctor who is against the COVID vaccine making this type of outrageous claim. She is speaking at a council meeting in Ohio.
I'm sure you've seen the pictures all over the internet of people who've had these shots and now they're magnetized. They can put a key on their forehead, it sticks. They can put spoons and forks all over them and they can stick. Because now we think that there's a metal piece to that. There's been people who've long suspected that there was some sort of an interface, yet to be defined, an interface between what's being injected in these shots and all of the 5G towers. Not proven yet, but we're trying to figure out what is it that's being transmitted to these unvaccinated people that are causing health problems.
What people like this doctor did with this stupid conspiracy theory is to thrust out harmful messaging into the stratosphere. That message has touched very gullible people who are prone to being suspicious of science. Because of that suspicion, they chose not to take the COVID vaccine. Because of this decision, born out of deliberate misinformation, many have died, as they were duped into believing the conspiracy theory instead of the truth. But the anti-vaxxer conspiracy theory pales to the one that Trump's MAGA followers believe. And this goes from QAnon to a bunch of other ridiculous and outlandish theories. There is so much tied up with these lunatic MAGA followers, and it is filled with so many twists and turns, you can't keep up with it. Here is a soundbite of one MAGA loyalist with her own take on Trump and their crazy movement.
Supporting Trump, what's your motivation?
He's our real president, thank you very much.
And what are you basing that on?
The fact that the election was stolen and he's our real president.
So
Biden is fake and the real Biden was assassinated at Gitmo in 2019, March of 2019. People know who our really president is. Right. We're fighting for America and we are going to save this country and the world. And people know that Biden is a pedophile and I don't want to go see him because they know he's a pedophile.
You talking about Creepy Joe?
Creepy Joe's a pedophile. Did you know that he had an island, his family has an island near Epstein, 8 miles away?
I didn't know
his
that.
His family, it's called Water Island. Yeah. Wow. His whole family are pedophiles.
So he has like He has like a kind of like a little Neverland, kind of like Michael Jackson had.
No, Michael Jackson was saving the children. They destroyed his reputation.
Right.
Michael Jackson, I thought for years he was on the bad side. He's not. He was saving the children. And when he plays at the inauguration, when Michael Jackson comes and plays for us, people are going to realize that it's all been a complete sham.
As I said, there is no way I can keep up with the ridiculousness of it. And I am not even going to try. It will just give me a headache. Unfortunately, too many people have fallen into this particularly dark rabbit hole and are seriously lost to it. They are unwilling to come back into the light. In this regard, you can definitely thank social media for creating this. Between 4chan, Chinese and Russian bots, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok misinformation, along with Fox News and their wannabe cohorts, all spreading lies and conspiracies, it is hard to battle it. It started out on the fringes, but now it is more mainstream, with politicians, celebrities, scholars, philosophers, and business people falling for the conspiracy and embracing it wholeheartedly. Some of these conspiracy theorists are seeking to start violent interactions that stem from their beliefs. It smacks a bit like it did when Hearst helped to create the Spanish-American War conflict. We are back to those days. So, what is old is new again. But violence is never the answer, yet those caught up in MAGA and QAnon, they desire it. They feel they need to defend their beliefs by any means necessary. They worship Trump, and they think anyone who does not, or doesn't believe what they believe, is the enemy. We are facing an existential crisis due to the influx of these very harmful conspiracy theories. They keep getting bigger and stronger by the day. I won't even pretend to know how we can possibly combat the lies and the conspiracy theories that dominate our political atmosphere. It doesn't just affect our country, and like it was back in the 1930s, it is infecting the world. There are some basic ways to fight against it. First, speak up, especially when you hear something ridiculous. Second, vote for candidates that oppose the lies and conspiracy theories. And third, when the politicians you voted for are elected, make sure that they do what is necessary with legislation to stop the conspiracy theories and the lies from taking hold of this country. We need people who will fight back against the cancer that has caught hold of our society. If we don't, then we will all be the loser, and that includes those who believe in the conspiracy theories. Their lives won't improve. But they will only realize that when it is too late to turn back and change things. We have to stop it now. It is too dangerous to let it continue prevailing in our society as it has. Remember, you have the power, not only as a critical thinker, but as a citizen of this country, to do what you have to do to make things turn around for the better. You must question all conspiracy theories. Don't fall into the trap. If you find that someone you know is deep into some dark ideology that causes harm, you need to find a way to bring them out of that darkness. This might not always be possible. Some people are too far gone, but the country isn't, yet. It is up to all of us to make sure it stays that way. We must keep truth alive and work with all we have to extinguish the lies. This starts with your vote and your voice. And, with that, that is all I have to say for this episode. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your family and friends, and give us a good review. This will help others find our podcast. Thanks again, and we will see you very soon with another episode of the Be a Great Thinker podcast. Until then, remember to question everything.
You've been listening to the Be a Great Thinker podcast. We take deep dives and look at stories from social, the psychological, the political, the ridiculous, to the mundane. It's what we do. Celebrating ideological diversity and independent thinking. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. But in the meantime, hit the website at beagreatthinker.com, on Facebook at Be a Great Thinker, and on Etsy at Great Thinker. See you next time.